All right, guys. So Ben Shapiro is going viral once again, I guess, after giving a barn burner of a speech at TPUSA's America Fest last night, as we're recording this. And he really takes to task what he refers to as grifters on the right, and basically says everything that a lot of people on the right have been thinking, but too scared to say publicly. And Ben Shapiro calls that out as well. So I'm not going to have a bunch of ado, but Tay's here with me, and we're just going to play this and react to it as we have thoughts. So let's get into it.
Let's go.
I knew Charlie from the time he was 18 years old, and I watched him build himself into one of the most powerful exponents of conservatism in America, one of the most powerful coalition builders in American history. But it's also sweet to see the number of people who continue to remember Charlie each and every day and to carry on his mission. Well, today, I want to talk about the future of the country. And the future of this country, this amazing country, relies on the future of the conservative movement. It relies on what TPUSA defines as its core mission: freedom, free markets, and limited government. And most of all, the future of this country relies on truth. This country relies on truth because victory, true, real, lasting victory, cannot be achieved without truth. Victory without truth is victory for a lie, and that is no victory at all. And unity without truth is no unity. It is merely solidarity in falsehood. You see, we live in a chaotic time, and a time when lots of people are asking lots of legitimate questions about the conservative movement. What ought we to think about the relationship between free markets and traditional virtue? How should we craft a pragmatic foreign policy that spreads our interests and upholds our ideals? What governmental means are appropriate to achieve political ends? All of these questions aren't new, of course. They've been asked for as long as human beings have been talking about politics, thousands of years. And over the course of this conference, you'll hear a lot of opinions on a lot of these questions. I have my own perspectives on them, of course. You can hear them every single day on my show. My fundamental values have been the same for 25 years. Peace through strength on foreign policy. Traditional values on social policy. Free markets with regard to economics. But today, I want to talk about something even more important. How to discern those attempting to speak truth from frauds and grifters. Because
Nervous applause.
Yeah. Everyone's like, how do we feel about? Yeah, I feel like a lot of this speech, I mean, even some of the others, it reminds me of whenever it's like a black person makes like a racist joke about other black people, and then the white people in the room are like looking at the black people like, are we allowed? It's funny, but I don't want you to be mad at me. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that happens so many times.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of anticipation because everyone knows what's going on the right. Like everyone knows, but nobody's really been willing to say, what needs to be said or really to broach the topic like seriously and in good faith and with specificity and like tackling the issue head on. Like almost nobody's been willing. I mean, there have been people on, like my X feed has a lot of people who are doing it, but as far as like very prominent figures of Ben Shapiro's stature, it's been crickets for the most part, and this divide has been allowed to kind of fester and deepen over the last few months since Charlie's death. And it's we've been talking about it. It's been so tragic to watch. We did an episode the day after, or a few days after Charlie's assassination, and we were talking about just, wow, isn't this amazing? Like the unity, the revival, the amazing demonstrations of the Christian faith at his funeral, and his wife's, demonstration of forgiveness, and everyone's united around the gospel, and we felt so hopeful. And in the months since then, where has that gone? It just completely evaporated, and the air's been sucked out of the room, and the movement's been completely, divided, and the narrative has shifted from like, let's carry on Charlie's legacy. Let's, focus on the gospel. Let's be, people of Jesus. Let's focus on America. Let's have, carry on his legacy of coalition building on the right. And instead, it's descended into this conspiracy theories around his death and fear mongering about Israel and fear mongering about all this other stuff, and platforming we talked about Nick Fuentes as well, and just like oh, it's cancel culture if you don't think that these voices should represent the conservative movement or be represented by popular people in the conservative movement. And there's just been all kinds of discord and strange sort of just everything but focusing on the things that Ben's laying out in this speech, which is, the foundational principles of America and conserving them, and pushing, Charlie's vision for America forward. That has taken a back seat to grievances and to conspiracy theory and this sort of populist energy that is bent toward just grievances and making people as suspicious and angry and riled up and doubtful and resentful as possible of the establishment, of the mainstream, whatever it might be. And I think what Ben is framing here is not like, hey, here's the mainstream view and it's correct, but it's, hey, here's the contours of what a healthy movement can look like. Here's the contours of what the Overton window should be in good faith discourse. And like this kind of, accusatory stuff, this kind of openly racist stuff, has no place in this movement, has no place in this country. And we need to put our foot down and say that. We need to be able to say no. And that's a separate conversation from, I believe in these values. I believe this is the best way forward. I believe that, this is the practical solution that we should have economically. Or we can't even have those discussions now because the movement is in shambles because of all this nonsense that's been being spewed about. And so this is sort of like it feels like very much a tentpole moment to kind of reassert the deep-rooted, deep-seated values of conservatism and of America, more importantly. Because like Ben says, if conservatism falls apart, America falls apart, because everyone in that room probably agrees that okay, all this leftist craziness, with the gender ideology and the open borders and all the stuff that we've lived through in recent years, and the Zoran Mamdani, let's burn down the original vision for America and have this socialist utopia, that's all you're going to get from the left. So if the right descends into the nonsense, you're not going to get anything from them either. This is the last best hope. The last defense is going to be on the conservative side. But if conservatives can't even represent that or put that forward, then we really do have no hope. So I like how Ben is framing this speech.
Yeah, and Ben's one of the rare people that recognize the moment. And I want to say this, for whether you agree with Ben or not on any of this, whether you're Team Tucker or Team Ben, you have to give credit that he is recognizing the seriousness of the moment where clarity does need to come, even if that does create conflict. Because I think a lot of people were just hoping that this was something they could just ignore and it would just pass away. And I just think, I understand the thought process behind that, but for the people that were betting on that strategy or hoping that it would work, they missed it. They completely whiffed that. And that way, it's we don't have to address it. Let's just focus on defeating the left. There's elections, blah, blah, blah. And again, they completely missed that call, because like you were saying at the end, I'm all for unity. I'm all for working together towards a common goal. But if the House is divided, it's just not going to work. And, we'll get more in this, but just to kind of set up a thought that really frustrates me. Again, whoever you're for, whatever team you're on, this whole thing where we keep talking about an issue, but we're talking around it. We're beating around the bush. We're talking over it. It is so frustrating, because I think that's where confusion comes in. And I think that's where disunity can breed, because I do think we need to be able to tolerate disagreement. But I feel like the conservative movement has always largely tolerated, to some extent, disagreement over policies and politicians. And there was even disagreement over hey, should Trump get the nominee for, post Biden? Should it be somebody else? And then after Trump got it, it was like, all right, well, I didn't think he should have got it, but he got it. So let's kind of move forward with that. And then when it came down to the VP nomination, people were disagreeing over that. People have disagreed over so that's existed. So this whole idea of like, oh, now all of a sudden, if I'm disagreeing with you, then that's cancel or deplatforming or denouncing. It's like, no, that clearly can't be the issue because there's always been disagreement. There's something else that's happening. And what's happening, it's like this weird like obfuscation where people are like talking, passing around, but like who they're talking about, but they won't say anything. So to give a clear example of what I'm getting at, what I appreciate about Ben's talk, again, even if I did not agree with Ben, what I appreciate about Ben is when he addresses, as we'll see later in his talk, he says the names of Candace, Tucker, Megyn Kelly. He doesn't play this game of, well, I'm going to talk about this thing, and you all know what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to say the thing that I'm really talking about. I'm just going to kind of leave it out there. Whereas, like, whenever Tucker takes the platform, correct me if I'm wrong, if someone's watching this, give the timestamp. I may have missed this, but I did listen to all of Tucker's speech. I'm almost positive he never says Ben's name one time, but he's obviously talking about Ben the entire time. And it's that, dude, that drives me up the wall.
Yeah.
So final example I'll give, we'll keep watching because I know we're just setting things up. Don't want to get too bogged down here. Not everyone might track with this, but I come from a world of like celebrity Christianity, like mega church stuff. And one of the things that always annoyed me is there was always this willingness to talk about and critique celebrity Christians and celebrity Christian culture and celebrity Christianity. But no one would ever say, who are we talking about whenever we would talk about it? So as much as I think for some people it was, standing for truth and establishing principles, I think it just led to more confusion because you would hear people who in your mind, you're like, well, wait a second. When I think of a celebrity Christian or celebrity pastor, I think of these people, but you're friends with those people and you like don't call out those people and you like platform those people and you like spend time with those people and you push their messages. So are we talking about them? Are we talking about somebody else? And then sometimes you would hear the people who you think are the celebrity preachers talk against celebrity culture. So then you just step back and you're like, all this is good in theory, but who the heck are we talking about? Are we talking about, and again, maybe some of you guys won't know these names if you're not from this ecosystem, but like, are we talking about Judah Smith? Are we talking about Rich Wilkerson Jr.? Are we talking about Stephen Furtick? Like, can we just, clearly you care enough to say something about this. So can we stop playing like children and let's just name names, get it out in the open, be really clear on the names and the claims, and then let's move forward dealing with the names and the claims and stop playing this game where we're being passive aggressive the whole time, but feel like we're somehow being more mature or trying to like tone down the temperature, or we're trying to, go for unity when what we're doing is we're throwing these little passive aggressive jabs, but we feel as though we're somehow like being the mature one because we're just afraid to make us name a specific person, lay out the claim that they made, and then just to deal with it head on. So again, whether you agree with Ben or not, like I'll say this of Tucker, I largely don't agree with what Tucker is saying in the way that he was critiquing Ben, but I would have respected it if Tucker would have named Ben. Like I would have acknowledged, thank you for naming Ben and naming the claim that you don't like that he said and dealing with it head on. But we're going to see that from Ben, but we're not seeing this from others.
Yeah. And that's another thought I've had recently is like, I sympathize with the impulse not to name names early on in this process because you don't want it to come off as like personal. I have a problem with what you're doing, not necessarily with you. And so your actions, your behaviors, your words, the effects of what you're doing, your insinuations, all those things, I don't appreciate. I disagree with the way in which you are engaging in public discourse. So my first thing is to attack the problem, attack the issue of what you're doing. But we've lived in this space for so long to where when you're tiptoeing around it so much so that there's a strange line where it becomes less of a thing where it's like out of deference to the principle of going after ideas and not people, where it descends into a more of a cowardice where now refusing to name the name is you being unwilling because of the cost of potentially naming the name of that person, you being unwilling to utter their name because you're not prepared to face whatever blowback will come from their following or from them personally. And if so it's this weird fine line, because I don't generally think that, we shouldn't attack people, but also we need to hold people accountable for their words, for their ideas, for their influence. And you have to be willing to call a spade, to speak truth, to whatever the situation demands. And I kind of think of I've thought about the biblical model a lot of, you probably can tell me chapter and verse, but when it says, like, if a brother's caught in sin, you go to him privately, and then if they don't, repent or whatever, you bring someone else from the church, go to them with them in solidarity. And then if they still refuse, that's when publicly you're like, okay, we're done. And now that applies, I guess, then in the case of a lot of these, like, influencers who know each other. And like, for example, when Matt Walsh called out Candace the other day, finally, he said, I've contacted Candace privately and shared this with her. And, I think that's a good and legitimate way of going about it. But I guess in the space of public discourse, though, like, I don't know Candace Owens, I don't know Tucker Carlson, I don't have access to these people. But I do still feel accountable at times when I see egregious things being done, that I'm like, I want to go on the record with my, two people that are going to like my tweet and just say, not that I'm doing it for that, but like, I'm going on the record calling it now. Like, this ain't it. And I've done that on things that Trump's done wrong. I've done that. And look, you may disagree with me. I may not always be right, but like, we cannot oppose the truth. We must always stand for the truth. We have to say what it is that we believe in. And so, props to Ben for doing that. But yeah, this whole naming names thing is, I think at a certain point it becomes necessary, and it's clear we're past that point. But let's continue. Unless you had a quick thought, or should we just keep going?
No.
Okay.
Agreeing.
Something is new. An informational environment rife with both opportunity and chaos. Opportunity because the legacy media gatekeepers are no longer in charge of what we see and what we hear. And chaos because an anarchic informational environment means we actually have to be smart in how we assess the information and arguments that we hear. Why does that matter? Well, because today the conservative movement is in serious danger. It is in danger, not just from a left that all too frequently excuses everything up to and including murder. The conservative movement is also in danger from charlatans who claim to speak in the name of principle, but actually traffic in conspiracism and dishonesty, who offer nothing but bile and despair, who seek to undermine fundamental principles of conservatism by championing enervation and grievance. These people are frauds, and they are grifters, and they do not deserve your time. And they are something worse than that, a danger to the only movement capable of stopping the left from wrecking the country wholesale. So today, I want to discuss 5 obligations that people who speak to you on matters of importance have to you. I want to speak to you about our duties. Our first duty is truth. We owe you the truth. That means we should not mislead you. It means we shouldn't hide the ball. We shouldn't be deliberately obscure about what we're telling you. We have an obligation to clarity and to honesty. This means that we actually have to be clear in the language that we use. We should not traffic in generality. We should not say things like, they shot Charlie, without specifying whom we mean by they. The person who allegedly shot Charlie Kirk, and whom all the evidence points at, all of it, is a gay, trans-loving furry.
So like, do I laugh? Do I clap?
If we are going to target ideological movements, we should talk about the fact that the radical trans movement treats all those who oppose it as existential threats. Or if we're going to talk about the Democratic Party making room for the radical trans movement and echoing its inflammatory rhetoric, well, we should talk about that. Those are specific problems, and they require specific responses. When people say they shot Charlie, however, they are instead trafficking in vagary that results in increased hatred without proposing any effective response. They are fostering despair and rage, and that makes things worse. We must also be honest about what people say and do, regardless of what that means coalitionally. It is the job of politicians to build coalitions. It's the job of those of us who try to shape public opinion to hold politicians to account and to hold them accountable to our values. We must not let fear of audience deter us from telling the truth. We must not let fear of other hosts deter us from telling the truth. So, for example, if Candace Owens decides to spend every day since the murder of Charlie Kirk if Candace Owens decides to spend every day since the murder of Charlie Kirk casting aspersions at TPUSA and the people who work here, who worked with Charlie every single day, his best friends, to cast aspersions at Mikey McCoy and Andrew Colvin and Blake Neff and Tyler Boyer, and yes, at Erica Kirk, and to imply or outright claim complicity in a cover-up over Charlie's murder, to spew absolutely baseless trash implicating everyone from French intelligence to Mossad to members of TPUSA in Charlie's murder or a cover-up in that murder, then we, as people with a microphone, have a moral obligation to call that out by name.
He forgot
Erica
the Mormon
Kirk and
people.
TPUSA never should have been put in the position to have to defend themselves against such specious and evil attacks, particularly in a time of mourning. And the people who refuse to condemn Candace's truly vicious attacks, and some of them are speaking here, are guilty of cowardice. Yes, cowardice. The
We
fact
talked about all the headlines that say Ben Shapiro goes scorched earth, and that right there is scorched earth. When you say other people speaking at this event after me are cowards, like wild. That is,
yeah, dude, it's strong, man.
That's not holding back.
It's real. Yeah, it's really strong. And I think one of the things that I have to wonder, it comes into my mind, you know, a lot of people are, you know, however much criticism you want to give towards Ben for as clear as he's being, it's like, okay, well, I find it more likely than not, I could be wrong about this, that Ben was probably clear with whomever it was that invited him, Erica, Andrew Colvin, whoever, like, hey, this is what I'm going to say. And I think part of the reason why that is likely the case is because Erica, who was the first to speak, my understanding, she like opened up the whole event before, and then Ben took the stage after her. She even gave a bit of this preface about how, as conservatives, we disagree, but that's a part of what Charlie believed in, and he stood for that. And she's like, so you're going to likely hear people on this platform have strong disagreements that, you know, that don't see eye to eye on, you know, things that are important, something along those lines. So, I mean, I think there's a good chance that they were fine with him saying the things that, you know, he's saying. Sure. I have some other criticisms broadly about how I think some of this is being handled, because I'm not just like 100% for how everyone's been handling. Like, I don't like pick a side and go, I 100% am for how this side or that side did it, and I'm 100% against how this side did it. But regardless of that, yeah, man, I do think that, again, it's just something of clarity. So even if you seethe with just complete frustration, dude, I'll even say, even as far as like Candace is concerned, I absolutely think so much of the conspiracy theories she's been spinning around are absolute lunacy. But the thing that bothers me the most and what drives me the most crazy is kind of what Ben's already talking about. It's this thing of like, you say enough that everybody can clearly read between the lines of what it is and who it is that you're implying and what it is that you're trying to say. But you leave enough murkiness there. So you personally, out of bad faith and lack of character, again, because anyone can look at what you're doing and see what you're doing and see what you're implying and see what you're saying. But because you yourself are someone that is bad faith, because you yourself are someone that lacks character, you feel like you've given yourself enough of an out so that whenever the spotlight comes on it or somebody presses you on a specific claim, you have enough room to like backpedal out of it and to go, well, I'm not sure. Well, I don't know. Well, I'm just doing. Again, that is what, look, you want to make some crazy claims and spin some crazy conspiracy theories, have a day at it, but name the freaking names and be clear about what you are saying and what you are charging and what you are claiming. Again, I will still think it's destructive and problematic, but I will respect that you are standing on business and we now can attack what it is that you are pushing forward. Because all of that, oh, let me make some claims, but they're not really claims. It's enough that I can kind of wiggle myself out of it and like change my position. It's just, dude, it's cowardly. And again, you are doing that because you're trying to control, you're trying to manipulate, you are in bad faith, and you are trying to just build a narrative. And that is why you're playing that game.
Yeah, a good word is equivocating. And we've talked about also, like you and I, when we're texting, just this Mott and Bailey strategy that we see over and over again. And, you know, whether it's the Daryl Cooper or Dave Smith or, you know, a lot of people in the same vein, Tucker's, whomever, you have like a more defensible position that you retreat to, but your speculations, your insinuations are a much less defensible position that you are espousing out there and gaining influence off of and influencing people to believe. And I've said it before in here, but I used to say this about the left, that they can't argue, so they frame. And what you're hearing from Ben is an argument. It is it's principles-based thinking. First principles inform the structure, the basis of his argument, and he's laying it out. And that's why there's such clarity, because it is founded on a cohesive pattern of thought of first principles. What you hear from the opponents of Ben are narrative spinning, and what you will hear is not direct rebuttals to the arguments that that Ben is laying out, or direct contradictions of, no, you're characterizing these principles in the wrong way. No, principle actually dictates that this is what we should be doing, that this opposes what you're saying. They won't confront that because Ben's not wrong according to first principles thinking. What they'll do is reframe the entire debate around, oh, well, you're just a shill for Israel, or, oh, you're compromised in some way. Oh, well, you're not factoring in this, you know, piece of speculative evidence that is part of this conspiracy. And so they'll have to constantly recast the conversation in a different light, in different terms, in order to provide a rebuttal. But that's not really providing a rebuttal. It's shifting the conversation. And it's so difficult to nail people down. Yeah, who do this because they're experts at this. And there's a clip. I mean, maybe I can dig it up and insert it here. But of Jordan Peterson back in March on the Joe Rogan podcast.
In a landscape that's been shorn of reliable expert input, right? Who do you rely on?
Right.
Okay, if you don't know who to rely on, like, how do you keep the bloody psychopaths at bay?
Right.
You know, and the conspiracy theorist mongers and the people who aren't trying to discover the truth, but who are using the conspiratorial edge, let's say.
The grifters.
Yeah, right. These are people who are clearly playing power games for their own benefit, and they're spinning up these conspiratorial narratives and riding on them and occupying them in this parasitical manner. This is a huge problem already on the right-wing side.
So before Charlie's death, before all this craziness started going down, and he was talking about the infiltration of psychopaths on the right, but he was using that term technically as a clinical psychologist. And there's this thing called the dark triad in clinical psychology, and in who's his big influence? Not Freud, but Carl, the Scandinavian dude. Why can't I think of his name? Carl Jung. Jung, yeah. So he's like a Jungian psychologist. But this dark triad thing, it's like antisocial personality traits. I think it's Machiavellianism, which is like the ability to manipulate with your words. Sociopathy, being a sociopath, which is like having no empathy, antisocial behavior, and like being willing to violate social norms, things like that. And man, I can't think of the last one off the top of my head, but like basically, if you look at this dark triad and then you look at the current landscape of discourse, it's very clear what type of personalities are peddling in this sort of behavior, and like it's wrong. I guess this is tough because I don't want to speculate, and it's, I can't say that Candace Owens is a sociopath, because even a clinical psychologist can't make such a diagnosis from a distance. But at the same time, when you recognize a pattern of sort of this manipulative, empathy lacking, norm violating, transgressive, narrative spinning, it is what it is. And I keep thinking I recently watched a documentary on HBO about this cult called Nexium, and the leader, Keith Raniere, and the whole time I was watching it, I was just thinking about what's going on in the current conservative discourse, because basically, like, the guy was a legitimate genius, but he was a sociopath, he was a psychopath, he was Machiavellian. He had the ability to manipulate people with his words, and he would figure out what you wanted most, and then reframe your life around this idea that, like, okay, you need my information, you need my my insight in order to ascertain the truth about yourself, in order to break free of the limitations around yourself that are being imposed on you by others or whatever. And these people, he bought into it. And when you watch the documentary, you're like, this could have been me, because these people are like smart and they're not like dummy hippies. Like, this is like successful people in Hollywood and Fortune 500 companies and politicians and foreign countries and stuff like that bought into this cult and were following this guy, and some of them giving him hundreds of millions of dollars to sustain this thing, because he was able to convince them that he knew the truth about the world, that he had unique insight. Again, that's also, like, we talk about Gnosticism in the Bible, this idea that you have special knowledge, and that is, why your loyalty should be giving you, or why people should follow you, because you have this kind of special insight. And there's a lot, and that's something Ben talked about at the beginning of this segment. He said we live in this chaotic information environment, and the mainstream media did in the COVID era kind of peaked with and many of our institutions like National Institute of Health and all kinds of, they abdicated their responsibility to the truth in the same way that Ben's talking about now. And what came in the wake was Podcastistan, was Joe Rogan, was all these people who were like questioning the mainstream narrative and saying, and they turned out to be right on very many things. But what's happened now is we have such a fragmented sort of information landscape, and the trust has shifted from institutions to personalities. But the problem with that is, if all the personality has to do is not to be truthful, but to be persuasive, and a lot of these personalities are putting forth narratives that are persuasive and they get people to buy into them, but they're not necessarily truthful. And if you are wise and discerning, and you take a critical lens to a lot of what's being said, you can this is exposed. But if you're just an everyday person, maybe like you'll find it very compelling and be sucked into it. So it's strange, man, because it's like, it's a deeper malaise than just institutions versus personalities. It's like on both ends, we as a people, as a culture, have kind of lost the value. They're called values because it's something that we value, and we don't value enough truth. Truth should be paramount, and we should be willing to confront the ugly realities about people we like and respect, or confront the ugly realities of our own biases or own presumptions that we were counting on, or staking our sense of identity, or staking our sense of being oriented in the world. If we're wrong about those things, we need to, we should be more loyal to the truth than to people, than to our priors, and when you lose sight of that, man, it just, we have mass confusion and chaos. And I think what the necessity of this speech shows is that it's symptomatic of the fact that we just have lost truth as a value in the culture. It's been a casualty, and this opportunists that Ben is talking about. I don't have particular animosity toward any of these people, because if it weren't them, it'd be somebody else, in this information environment. I think that's important to say too. Like, this is not, it's sort of like people, scapegoat Karl Marx as the devil. It's like, okay, well, if it weren't Karl Marx, somebody else would have come up with this kind of stuff, and the mind virus would have spread in other ways. It's our human fallibility that falls into these things. And we live in a moment right now where we need to have moral clarity, reassert what it means to care about the truth, to enshrine the truth as something that is sacred, that must be defended, that must be put above every other thing, even when it conflicts with our own biases or people that we like. So kind of all over the place, but I feel like I had a few good nuggets in there.
I want to underscore quickly at least one of the nuggets, and if something else comes to me, then it will. But one of them, you nailed it again. What I'll say it 1,000 times. What I appreciate, regardless if you agree or disagree with Ben, what I appreciate that Ben is doing is exactly like you said. Ben is establishing a clear case. It is being built upon. It's being built upon not just principles, but premises. Like he's establishing premises, and then there's a conclusion, and then he's clear on his claims, and he is building a case that. Here's the great thing. If you do not like Ben and if you disagree with Ben, you actually now have something that you can attack and debunk and show where he's wrong. You can actually say, Ben made these claims. Here's how he made those claims. These are the premises that support them and the conclusion that follows. And here is why I do not think he is right about any of the things that he just said. He's giving you the opportunity to do that. Whereas when, again, we're not going to have time to watch his speech, but anyone can go and watch it. The moment Tucker takes the stage, you talked about that framing thing. And again, even if I agreed with everything Tucker was saying, like I agree with Christianity and I disagree with atheism, but I've seen debates where the atheist builds a more good faith case and establishes their points and positions than the Christian does, to where I'm going, Christian, I agree with you, but I do not respect the way that you're setting this up. And I disagree with the atheist, but I respect their good faith engagement, trying to really build a case for their position. Tucker gets up there and starts talking about, I can't believe at a Turning Point event that, is all in the name of Charlie, people are talking about denouncing and deplatforming and disavowing. And then it's just like, because those, to a conservative,
that's reframing.
That's just exactly. He's reframing, because to a conservative, well, we're freedom of speech people. We don't denounce. We're not afraid of ideas. We believe in debate. So we don't want to denounce and disavow and deplatform. But it's like, homie, nobody said, literally Ben's entire talk, he never even hints towards deplatforming these people, disavowing these people, denouncing these people. He doesn't do it a single time. He is just simply attacking their ideas, and will even spend time pointing to character. But I think character judgments are welcome to be made, and it's not an ad hominem when this person is in a repeated habit of doing a thing and giving multiple opportunities to do otherwise. They choose to not do it and instead continue to make bad choices and propagate bad ideas. I think you're free in that moment to say, okay, now I'm going towards, you have nefarious motives and you're manipulative, because this isn't just a bad idea. This is a pattern and a trend that you're implementing when you've been given every opportunity to turn the other way. So this isn't just simply bad ideas. This is coming out of a bad character. And so now I'm able to engage that lane. But yeah, it's the reframing thing. It's this thing of like, and so again, Tucker's not giving me anything that I can actually engage with, because I just simply go, well, that's not what Ben was doing. He's just simply saying that these are horrible, destructive, bad ideas, and we should deal with those destructive, terrible, bad ideas. And that's not deplatforming. And then so the second thing that I just wanted to underscore, you talked about how like there's been this swing where, as been mentioned, there was this mainstream media kind of gatekeeping with information and knowledge, and they did a bad job with it. They were manipulative. They did control things.
They compromised their first principles and values.
They did. And so, but now what we're swinging towards, it's like, I would describe that period of information. It's like an oligarchy where it's these, select few elites that have the ability to lead the masses. And here's what to think, here's how to think. But now there's this pendulum swing to just pure anarchy. And both of those are worlds I don't want to live in. I don't want to live in an oligarchy, but I also don't want to live under anarchy, where it's just all, free for all. Everything is seen as valid and anyone can do whatever the heck they want and behave however they want to. Like, both of these ways of life are destructive. And so I think that's what we're experiencing in the world of information, is it's just turning into pure anarchy. And not in the sense of like free speech, where, again, I think you should be able to say what you want. It's anarchy in the sense of all ideas are treated as equally valid and equally plausible.
Relativism.
That's the problem. That's the issue. Where, yeah, you can say whatever you want. You can think whatever you want. But not all ideas and not all thoughts are equally valid, valuable, and plausible as other ideas. And so, and it's fine to hold that line.
Yeah, it's like, is there a standard by which we judge whether an institution is adhering to proper principles, or, what their role is supposed to be in the media, or whether a personality is able to do that? And if there are no principles, then it is anarchy. Then it is a morally relative landscape where everything's equally valid and true, and there are no, proper ways of going about things. But I don't think that's true. I think there is a real moral order to the universe, but also B, it doesn't work. So whether or not you believe in moral realism, like the anarchy stuff, it descends into chaos and disorder and division, and that's exactly what we're seeing now. So you mentioned Candace Tucker and Megan and their responses, and I do have their brief response. Both Megan and Candace tweeted, and Tucker spoke after Ben, so I have a little clip of him too, because I did want to represent their side as much as is appropriate, I guess, to this specific speech. And also the thing I couldn't think of before, the dark triad, is narcissism, the most obvious one. There's narcissism, Machiavellianism, and then sociopathy. But yeah, I'm not saying anyone is a dark triad, psychopath, but if someone were, think about how a malignant narcissist, Machiavellian manipulative person would respond to being accused of spewing nonsense or lying or anything like that. Judge them by their fruit, as Jesus would say. And it's not for me to judge, but like Jesus said, I quote this almost every time we talk, but be wise as serpents, as innocent as doves. Like, I'm not going to prejudge anyone because I don't like them. So I'm going to be innocent with regard to how I'm holding them in my mind and in my heart or whatever. But I'm also going to be wise as a serpent. I'm going to know what a wolf looks like, and I'm going to know how to recognize someone who's not acting in good faith. Know how to recognize somebody who's manipulative, who's not confronting arguments or speaking, responding directly to points being made against what they're doing. I'm going to know how to recognize when someone's equivocating and not being honest about what they actually think. That's the tension that we have to live in, but that's life, I guess. So let's keep going.
That they have said nothing while Candace has been vomiting all sorts of hideous and conspiratorial nonsense into the public square for years is just as cowardly. Second, because we owe you the truth, we owe you the duty to speak out of principle, not personal feeling. It should not matter whether we despise someone or whether we love someone. The question is what they say and what they do, and whether those things are morally decent or not. On a political level, do they foster freedom, justice, and prosperity? On a personal level, do they treat others as they would wish to be treated? Personal feeling is not a substitute for moral judgment. To take again the Candace Owens situation as an example, friendship with public figures who say or do evil things is not an excuse for silence on the matter. Politics is not the sisterhood of the traveling pants. Politics is about principle, and if you are willing to sacrifice basic truth and simple principle in favor of emotional solidarity, you have betrayed your fundamental duty to the American people. First off, I should break the omerta here and just be a little bit clear. The notion that people in our industry are close friends, like we all take holiday breaks with each other and go to each other's kids' graduations and stuff, it's generally untrue. Some people do that, most of us don't. We see each other at conferences and we talk on the phone and all the rest. We're business colleagues. But even if it were true that other public figures were our best friends, our very best friends, that does not relieve us of our duty to speak out of principle and not to cover up evil or shy away from addressing it out of friendship. So no, Tucker Carlson, it is not an excuse to go silent on Candace's targeting of TPUSA. or to mirror.
I love the like booze and stuff. You know, it reminds me of like when you watch like documentaries or dramatizations of like old school like British Parliament and people debating, and there's like a guy giving a speech and they're like, bah! Like right in the middle. It's like in political discourse. It's like this is to a degree. It's kind of healthy, you know. So I like the booze.
Bullshit lines of questioning because you love Candace personally. The same holds true of Megyn Kelly, a person I consider a friend, characterizing Candace as a young mother and thus shying away from condemning her actions or fibbing about them. That is a non-starter. Meghan Markle is a young mother. Ilhan Omar is a young mother. That doesn't matter. And when Megyn said this week, quote, "My goal and my job here is to try to understand, yes, where Candace is coming from on this," and says she sees no purpose in inserting herself, quote, into this on one side, that is a moral and logical absurdity. There is only one moral side here, Erica Kirk's side. You know, the side of the widow with 2 children, whose husband was shot live on camera in front of all of us. Friendship with the person accusing TPUSA of a cover-up of Charlie's murder is no excuse for cowardice. Third, and relatedly, we have a duty to take responsibility for what we say and do. If we hire awful people, we're responsible for that. I have some experience there, as you might suspect. That means that if we offer a guest for your viewing, we owe it to you to ask the kinds of questions that actually get at the truth. If we agree with the guest, that's fine, but we should own it. So, for example, if you host a Hitler apologist, Nazi-loving, anti-American piece of refuse like Nick Fuentes, you know, the Nick Fuentes who said that the Vice President of the United States is a, quote, fat gay race traitor married to a Jeet. The person who said that Charlie Kirk was a, quote, retarded idiot. The person who said, and pardon my language here, it's his quote, that he, quote, took Turning Point USA and fucked it, and that's why it's filled with groypers. If you have that person on your show and you proceed to glaze him, you ought to own it. There is a reason that Charlie Kirk despised Nick Fuentes, and indeed even chided Dinesh D'Souza for debating him. He knew that Nick Fuentes is an evil troll, and that building him up is an act of moral imbecility. And that is precisely what Tucker Carlson did. He built Nick Fuentes up. And he ought to take responsibility for that, just as he ought to take responsibility for glazing pornographer and alleged sex trafficker Andrew Tate, or for mainstreaming fake historian and pseudo-Nazi apologist Daryl Cooper as America's best and most honest popular historian. Hosts are indeed responsible for the guests they choose and the questions they ask those guests. Fourth, because we have a duty to truth, we also have a duty to provide you with evidence of the claims that we make. Emotive accusations, conspiracy theories, and just guessing questions, that's lazy and stupid and misleading. None of them are a substitute for truth. None of them are a substitute for evidence. So, when Candace Owens says, I don't know, but I know, that is retarded. And we are all more retarded for having heard it. When Steve Bannon, for example, accuses his foreign policy opponents of loyalty to a foreign country, he's not actually making an argument based in evidence. He's simply maligning people that he disagrees with, which is indeed par for the course from a man who was once a PR flack for Jeffrey Epstein. Check the record. Our duty to provide you evidence means we actually have to do much more than just ask questions. Just asking questions is something my 5-year-old does, and it's really cute when it comes from my 5-year-old. But when grown men and women spend their days just asking questions without, seeking answers, they are lying to you. In fact, they're doing something even worse. They are seeding distrust in the world around you, and they are enervating you in the process. So, For example, if many speakers, including Tucker Carlson and others, get on stage here at TPUSA and claim, without proper evidence, that Jeffrey Epstein was running a Mossad rape ring being covered up by the Trump administration, they are not actually uncovering a conspiracy or effectuating a solution. They are claiming a special provenance to information they won't let you see, which builds their power and leaves you with none. They are also implicating in their speculation actual human beings, good human beings, like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi, and yes, the President of the United States, even if they're too cowardly to say President Trump's name. And that means you won't trust those good people in the future. You haven't gotten smarter, you've just been manipulated. When forced to demonstrate their evidence, these same people will often refuse to provide it. They'll claim ignorance. They'll pretend they're outside the system, and they don't have access to actual information. You know, they're just asking questions. But many of these same people have direct pipelines to informational sources. So, for example, if Tucker wants answers to his questions about, say, Jeffrey Epstein, he could call the Vice President of the United States. He's quite close with him. But he won't, because that might undermine the empty speculation. None of this means there aren't actual real conspiracies in the world. Of course there are. But actual conspiracies require actual evidence. Yes, there was a Russiagate conspiracy, and we know the names of the people involved and what they did. We know Hillary Clinton and Fusion GPS and James Comey and Loretta Lynch and Adam Schiff. We know all of those people. Yes, there was a COVID-19 conspiracy. We know that Anthony Fauci worked to shut down alternative solutions from people like Jay Bhattacharya. But when people posit a conspiracy and then provide you no evidence, they are doing you a fundamental disservice, and they are making you stupider in the process. Finally, because it is our job to make the lives of our audience better, right? That's really our job, is to give you more information to make your lives better. We have a duty to propose solutions. That's why we have to talk about our problems in order to find the solutions. That's what politics was supposed to be about, after all, finding solutions to our common problems. If we speak endlessly about the problems we face, without ever positing a solution other than wrecking the system or centralizing power in a cult-like figure, we are not finding solutions. We are merely making problems worse. Just asking questions, positing vague conspiracies, raving like Alex Jones about the secret confederacies that control your life, none of it makes your life better. None of it. In fact, it makes your life markedly worse. That's because if you truly come to believe that nothing in your life is in your control, you can't even take control of your own life. You despair of your ability to change your own circumstances, and then you fail. And you must not fail. Because here is the most fundamental truth of all in the United States. For all of its problems, many of which, a huge number of which, are real and serious, the United States is still the greatest bit of that begins with truth. We owe you that quest for truth. You owe yourselves that quest.
I think it just skipped there.
It does. Just to, yeah, I know this because I watched it this morning.
Oh, okay.
There are something with the editing. This happens with Tucker's speech. This happens with Ben's speech, and it happens a couple other times during the Q&A. It jumps. I don't know what happened with the stream or the edits, but yeah, it jumps.
Okay. Well, interesting.
Yeah.
For truth. And true victory only Constitution ever devised by man. Thanks so much. Happy to take a couple questions.
There it is. Okay. Before we unpack everything here, I do want to share Tucker and Candace and Megyn Kelly's tweets and responses first.
After that kind of bitter, sardonic. I just got here and I feel like I missed the first part of the program. Hope I didn't miss anything meaningful. But I just want to say, I don't think I did. No, I'm just kidding. I watched it. I laughed. That kind of bitter, sardonic laugh that emerges from you when like Upside Down World arrives. When your dog starts doing your taxes and you're like, wait, it's not supposed to work this way. To hear calls for like deplatforming and denouncing people at a Charlie Kirk event, I'm like, what? This is hilarious. Yeah, this is hilarious. Actually, one of the clips I was listening to myself, thinking as I often do when I hear myself speak, which is never, because I never watch myself, but at these events, they always play like the role of you. And I'm like, that guy is pompous. Woo! Sorry about that. we don't see ourselves clearly. But the prediction that, at some point when Republicans took power again, which I did everything I could, to help, and really felt that was important. I still think, I was right. But I really thought that the impulse to deplatform people, or even to use the word platform as a verb, which it's not, it's a noun, don't steal my nouns, deplatform and denounce. Why haven't you denounced somebody else? The whole Red Guard cultural revolution thing that we so hated and feared on the left, that we did everything we could to usher in a new time where you could have an actual debate. I mean, this kind of was the whole point of Charlie Kirk's public life. And I think that he died for it. I really believe that. And I know a lot about it because the last several months of Charlie's life were devoted in part to arguing about this event, in fact, this speech, in fact, my speech here, which he asked me to do earlier this year, this summer, and was immediately put under just immense pressure from people who give money to Turning Point, I would assume good people, but who wanted him to take me off the roster. And this has all become public, and the whole thing is so sad that I never talk about it, except to say Charlie stood firm in his often stated and deeply held belief that people should be able to debate, and that if you have something valid to say, if you're telling the truth, you ought to be able to explain it calmly and in detail to people who don't agree with you, and that you shouldn't immediately resort to shut up racist. You shouldn't immediately go to motive. By the way, shut up racist is the #1 reason I voted for Donald Trump. And because I'm just sick of it. I mean, first of all, if I was a racist, if I was a bigot, I would just say so. Okay, it's America. You're allowed to be whatever kind of person you want. I'm not. I'm sincerely opposed, have always been, and will always be. But the style of debate where you prevent the other side from talking or being heard because you immediately go to motive, well, I wonder why you're asking that question. I wonder why. Why are you asking that question? I detect in the question a certain evil in your soul. And everyone listening should know that listening to you implicates them, and that they someday may be asked to denounce you, and that friendship is not a reason to defend someone. Love is no defense. I kind of thought we'd reached the end of that. And as far as I'm concerned, we have. And I'm not going to play by those rules. I'm not going to engage in that. If someone doesn't like what I think, fine with me, as long as I get to express it. That's my view.
Mm-hmm. So it's hard, but I tried to write down his rebuttals of what Ben was actually saying, which he kind of characterized Ben as wanting to deplatform, which wasn't anything Ben said at any point, but he did criticize Tucker for platforming Nick Fuentes. So he seemed to suggest that Charlie Kirk encouraged debate, supported Tucker from being canceled from TPUSA's roster for speaking events because the organization was pressured by a Jewish donor to take him off the list because of his behavior or whatever. And Charlie stood by him. And so Tucker seems to insinuate that, Charlie died for platforming in general, for the right to platform people in general. And I platformed Nick Fuentes. Ben's criticizing me for that, but he's wrong because Charlie supported platforming people even if they disagree, which I'm trying to be charitable, and I think that there's logically perhaps something there, but if we're using Charlie as a standard, Charlie did also, there's a clip of him, maybe I can find it, shutting down a Groyper, a Nick Fuentes fan, who comes into his event and espouses white nationalist ideals and open, racist ideals that are on par with Nick Fuentes' beliefs. And Charlie's like, you and your ideology has no place in the conservative movement. Get out of here, basically. So how to square those two things, I don't know. But I don't think that it's as simple as because if that's the case, then are there any guardrails on conversation whatsoever? And that's kind of what Ben's whole speech was bringing up. Or do we live in this sort of, again, relativist environment where anything goes, no one's wrong. All that matters is the right for everyone to speak. And like this idea that he says, like, it's love to support your friends. There's like, again, truth to that, but it's also if Tay is, spreading a bunch of nonsense, or doing a bunch of evil things, it's not loving for me not to confront him personally and then not to publicly say something if he persists in his sin, as I laid out before. So, love doesn't look like unconditional support. And again, that seems to me, and I'm trying to be good faith here because I understand the impulse to like, I want to protect people that I am close with. But it seems to me that that's sort of an obfuscation and dodging of the question of like a moral responsibility to call out people who are wrong, even if they're your friend or on your quote unquote side. So I don't personally find Tucker's defense there compelling. He also said, like, I voted for Trump because the left's whole argument was shut up racist. And again, fair, but this is a deeper argument that's being made against you than shut up racists. And I think it's more robust than that. And this is what I said. I think I tweeted this early on with the whole Dick Fuentes stuff, is like the left's accusations of racism against the right were hollow and unfounded, and they didn't work eventually with Trump won a majority of the vote in this last election, even though his supporters were called racist and fascist and stuff, because common sense people could discern that those accusations were untrue, because there was no supporting evidence to back up the claims of racism. Everything was invented and specious and wrong and slanderous. But if you invite open racists into the tent, and if you platform them, as you use that word, and trigger warning, or if you, gloss or glaze them, whatever the proper term is, then those accusations become true. And if those accusations are now true, then saying shut up racist is actually appropriate when the person is actually racist. Like, I mean, that's actually not enough, that's not strong enough words. And so we've entered this space where it's like questioning as to whether racism even exists, or questioning as to whether like anti-Semitism is even really a thing. And that's what I've often found myself. I'm like, okay, I want to hear Tucker's definition of racism, of white nationalism, of anti-Semitism. Like, if those things exist, and if so, what qualifies something as one of those things? Give me an example, because so far all I ever hear is, you're just saying shut up racist. You're just saying, you're just using those weapons as clothes, which happens to be fair. But this is again like going back to the idea of like specificity and precision and being able to make I may be wrong. I don't want to attribute bad motives to Tucker, but what I'm hearing is not the same sort of clarity and precision of speech and articulation of legitimate, here are my positions and here are my thoughts and here are my critiques of those against me. Instead, it's this sort of tone and laughing and reframing and it's not, a bold no. We share the same fundamental values about truth and standard of evidence and the presumption of innocence and all these things. And here's why you're wrong. It's just sort of, no, what you're doing is actually this, and instead of directly rebutting the argument. So, but again, that's how it appears to me. There's maybe Tucker fans who would sympathize more with his arguments and think that maybe Ben's the one, reframing and saying that this is such a, and that's kind of what Tucker suggested at one point too, that like Ben is the ones framing things as like, you're the Stalinist Maoist, shutting people down. I just think that also falls kind of hollow, because at no point has Ben suggested that force should be used against anyone, or that anyone should be deprived of their ability to speak. He's just saying, I think you're morally wrong. I disagree. And I don't think that you have a place within the bounds of this movement. I don't think the people you're platforming have a place within the bounds of this movement. So anyway, I tried to represent Tucker's points in good faith and spell out some of his arguments, but that's kind of what stood out to me.
Yeah. I mean, even looking at things from a good faith perspective, one of two things is happening with Tucker. Either what I would say, being good faith and listening to Tucker, several of his episodes, and listening to what Ben talked about, listening to what Tucker talked about, is either Tucker, and it could be a blend of the two, either Tucker is just falling into the ego reaction that we all fall into when we are having a disagreement with, like, you know, imagine if it's like a spouse or a friend, where your ego gets hit a little bit more than your intellect does, because we are not rational robots. We are deeply emotionally driven. And there have been times where, you know, you're having that disagreement with your wife or a close friend, and it's like, even when you start seeing they have a point and they have a case, your ego is so invested at this point, you will not yield, and you will find a way to reframe and to try to argue. And it's like, deep down, you know, you're not right, and you know, but it's just so hard. But you won't even acknowledge that. Like, in the moment, you're still acting like it's about the disagreement, or it's about the premises and the points. So either that's happening with Tucker, because it does seem like Tucker is more emotionally reactive based on other clips and things like that. People can go dig into that if they want to. I'm not going to like validate the claim, but just based on things I've seen, he does seem a bit more emotional reactive. Or he is just he is just straw manning and misrepresenting out of a very calculated place. Because again, the number of times Tucker has mentioned the whole deplatforming, disavowing, and the number of times people have clarified, I am not saying that it was wrong for you to platform. I am not saying you need to disavow. I am not saying you need to denounce. My primary criticism is that when you had this person on your show, you polished them up and engaged with them in such a way that you intentionally made them more palatable to the broader public, when instead their ideas are more destructive or more corrosive to the side it is that we represent. Because let me just quickly say this. I actually disagree with Ben on how Ben has approached Nick Fuentes. I think Ben has kind of put himself in a bit of a corner, in that he, at this state, he like feels as though he can't ever engage with Nick Fuentes, because he has spent so much time making the case as to why he refuses to engage with Nick Fuentes. But just in the same way, I, you know, pointed out, like, I mean, you can try, maybe you thought the right move to make was just to ignore Candace. It would blow over all of this all of this, like, we got to focus on what's important. We don't need to give airtime to this crazy stuff. Let's just focus on, it's like, too bad, bro. Like, it's caught too much traction. I actually would want Ben to debate Nick Fuentes. I would actually want Ben to talk to Nick Fuentes. So I actually think that Ben has miscalculated Nick Fuentes and how to engage with them and how to deal with him. I'm even okay to say, look, I know this is going to sound shocking and horrifying. I even disagree with Charlie Kirk himself. I disagree with the fact that when Dinesh D'Souza debated Nick Fuentes, which I've never watched, and then Charlie sends him this text message and is like, Nick Fuentes is a troll, he's vermin, even you debating him. I actually disagree with that. I think Charlie Kirk was wrong in the way that he responded to Dinesh. Now, again, I didn't watch the Dinesh debate. I don't know if like Dinesh did a good job or not. But let's just say if that principle were the case, like, you shouldn't even debate that idea. I think you don't have to debate every idea. Like, if you just I don't think it's incumbent upon anyone to have a conversation with everyone, nor do I think it's incumbent upon any person to debate with every person who disagrees with them. So I'm not saying like Charlie he needs to use his platform and his voice to engage with Nick. But regardless, if anyone just wants to know where I stand on this, I'm not Team Ben on the whole, like, you know, let's not even talk to Nick Fuentes. I actually disagree with that. But I do agree with just the overall diagnoses that there was this polishing that was going on with Nick and making him more palatable than what he really is. And again, you want to go listen to Nick, go to Rumble, go watch his content, go watch his clips on X, like, go listen to Nick as much as you want to. That doesn't bother me. I actually have watched many of Nick's live streams ever since all this stuff has gone on, because I'm just like, all right, he's this big deal. I want to actually hear him out and hear what he has to say. So I have no problem with people listening to him. But going back to Tucker, I just think this whole mischaracterization and this straw man about how, like, Everyone's saying denounce, homie. Like, the argument people are making is that when you engaged with Nick Fuentes, that you were not approaching him with the same level of intensity that you have approached other people that you disagree with, and that is the criticism. It's cliche, but the juxtaposition people make is the Ted Cruz interview with the Nick Fuentes interview. Now, I will say Tucker has said this at least one time, and I'm like, okay, now you're actually engaging with the argument. Tucker, one time, it might have been when he was with Megyn Kelly, he said something like, the reason why I treated Ted Cruz like that is because he is an actual elected politician that can influence policy, where Nick Fuentes is just some podcaster. And the reason why I'm going to hold Ted Cruz's feet to the fire is because he's like a representative of the people, and he actually has political power, where Nick Fuentes is just some. Now, again, you can disagree with the argument and point out the fallacies in it, but I was finally like, thank you, Tucker. You're actually engaging with the criticism. Yeah. Like, do more of this. Engage with the criticism and stop giving this blanket deplatform, denounce, disavow. Because, dude, I promise you, if Ben Shapiro would have gotten on that stage and would have gone on a tirade about a bunch of people on the left, like he did about going after Tucker, and nobody would be claiming that Ben is trying to denounce, disavow, and deplatform. We would just be like, that's right. Like, if Charlie Kirk gets up there and he starts talking about the evils of the left and how we must defeat them and we must destroy them and, we must, come against all of what they're trying to do with abortion, and we need to defeat Biden, and we need to like there's a reason why Charlie, as much as he is for like having an open platform, and Charlie's not having like a bunch of like pro-choice people come to TPUSA and like give just an open speech on why you should let people have abortions up until birth. So like, that's where I've like this whole thing of like, he was for like, we're disavowing people, we're denouncing. It's like, no, what Ben did is what he would do with anybody that he doesn't agree with. You all don't think it's a problem when he does it with people on the left. The issue is that he's doing it with people that are technically under this tent of conservatism. But again, instead of just dealing with his argument, you're now just treating it and you're mischaracterizing it. So I think, one, I do think there's misrepresentation there. And then there's just an overall straw manning. Even what Tucker was talking about, which we didn't watch it in the clip, but in the Q&A, this person does come up to Ben, ask a question. And Ben does point to the person's motive. And he's like, I am curious as to why you keep asking about this thing in particular. And the guy was zeroing in on, apparently, I don't know the details, I've just learned about this from the Q&A, in like, I think the 60s, Israel attacked or bombed an ally ship, if I'm remembering correctly, the USS Liberty. It was so anyway, there was this issue about it. And so, but again, I could be missing the details because I'm not aware or privy to that information. I just am trying to remember the Q&A. But Ben is like answering the question, but he keeps asking the person, like, I'm trying to understand, like, there seems to be a reason why you're asking me that question, though. It doesn't seem like you're just kind of curious about this. It seems like there's this underlying motive. Dude, if anyone goes back and watches that clip, it does seem like the guy has an underlying motive. It does seem like he isn't just trying to ask Ben a purely just factual question about this. Right. It seems as though he is angling at an anti-Semitic impulse. It seems like he's angling at this thing of that Israel's nefarious and they're trying to, attack him. Now, again, Ben could be wrong on reading things that way, but it feels like that's the case. And Ben doesn't shut the guy down. Ben doesn't tell him to shut up. Ben doesn't tell him to go sit down. Ben continues to engage, but he continues to go back and say, but I just want to come back and ask you, why are you asking me this question? And the guy refuses to answer why he's asking Ben the question. So even Tucker's the way how Tucker represented how Ben handled that question, it was wrong. That wasn't the tone Ben had. That wasn't the way he approached it. So even if Tucker is right, the way he's going about trying to establish his case is fundamentally, to me, problematic. And the last thing I'll say about the whole shut up racist thing, number one, the reason why I don't like the left has way more to do than just their rhetorical game. Like, even if they were not rhetorically problematic and they were completely rational and logical and they engaged in good faith discussion, I don't align with the values and I don't align with the policies. It's not just purely how they approach things rhetorically. So one, it's like, well, there's way more reasons why I'm against the left than just that. But the second thing I'll say, to me, the whole issue with the shut up racist thing, and you're kind of getting to this, Taylor, the whole issue with the shut up racist is that invoking you being called a racist, they were misdiagnosing you. like the criticism that conservatives always gave to the left, it wasn't like, hey, like, no, like, you should listen to us racists. Like, we racists have a great point, and how dare you try to shut us down and you won't listen to our actual racist positions. No, the criticism that conservatives were giving to the left was that you are mischaracterizing us by calling us racist when we're actually not racist. So the rhetorical frustration was that we are not racist, but you're using that label as a way to shut down conversation. It's a different criticism if the person was actually racist. Now, again, just because someone's racist, I don't think that they should necessarily shut up. But the way that the left was using it wasn't that the right was actually a bunch of racists and they're like, we don't want to talk to you, you actual racist. It's that you're just simply calling us racist because we are willing to mention the correlation between race and some of these things that we see happening in our culture and our society. And so it was a mislabel. So anyway, yeah, I hear you, man. I do think, again, we should approach Tucker, like you mentioned, in good faith. So let's actually engage with his case, if you will. And I just think when you hear Ben out and you hear Tucker out, not who do you think is right, but how are they going about establishing their position? I think the way that Ben goes about establishing his position is more good faith, and it's more intellectually robust, and it's more solid, so that even if you disagree with him, there's something to engage with. Where with Tucker, again, even if you agree with him, I think it's fairly clear that at least in this instance, he approached it by either being driven by just emotionalism and completely misunderstood out of his own ego, or even worse, he actually actively, intentionally strawmanned the position, reframed, dodged the actual case that Ben was making, and then mischaracterized Ben as well. And that's how I look at things, regardless of who's right in their position. How are they going about approaching their position? That's how I look at it.
Yeah. I have thoughts, but I have to jump in 5 minutes for a call. So I want to quickly read Megyn Kelly's and Candace Owens' tweets. So Megyn Kelly responded to Ben's speech and said, Ben Shapiro and Barry Weiss are in a joint attack on yours truly, their friend, tonight without a damn clue of what's been going on behind the scenes for months. Probably should have checked with TPUSA or Erica Kirk first. I'm embarrassed for them. So I don't have time to get into that at this second, but Megyn has kind of been doing this. She's, as Ben said, she said Candace's young mother, so we need to give her grace, and I don't really know what's going on. She's kind of been trying to play both sides, and this is, I don't know. If you believe Megyn, then this is a very nice, convenient out to have, to be able to be like, oh, well, I really know what's going on behind the scenes, and you don't. She's not actually addressing any of the criticisms levied at her. It's a way of reframing the conversation to escape having to do that. So, and then let's see, Candace tweeted and said, every time Ben speaks, I feel more certain Israel is involved in 9/10Z. He's just way too invested in Charlie's murder. He never liked Charlie and now suddenly pretending he had a duty to defend his legacy. Ben only cares about Israel's interests, so Israel is involved. Okay. And I just got to say, the response is, Ben is too invested in Charlie's murder. Ben never liked Charlie, and now Ben is suddenly pretending that he had a duty to defend his legacy, and Ben only cares about Israel. It's hard not to just think this is the largest amount of projection I've ever seen condensed into 240 characters. There's the classic Darvo, deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. This is who has been so invested in Charlie's murder that they've spent 3 months live streaming about it to millions of people, collecting all kinds of every possible insinuation or lead, accusing all kinds of people, saying a random guy that was there who plays on the soccer team, but because he wore a hoodie, he's suspicious because there's people who have maroon shirts on. Like, who's too invested in Charlie's assassination? And invested literally? Who's benefit? I thought this myself the other day. What human being on planet Earth has benefited the most from Charlie Kirk's assassination out of everyone alive? It's Candace Owens. And I'm not saying that now a logical or like a conspiratorial person would say, well, she's probably implicated in his murder because of that, because she benefited so much. But I'm not going to say that because that's insane, because there's no evidence to support that. However, I can say that she is profiting off of his death and his assassination more than any other human being on planet Earth. So to sit here and say that Ben Shapiro is too invested in Charlie's assassination, I'm sorry, just no patience for that. And pretending like he had a duty to defend his legacy when Charlie, you weren't invited to the funeral. Charlie hasn't been speaking to you. You haven't spoken at TPUSA events for years. And yet you're sitting here saying that Ben wasn't really Charlie's friend. And now he's pretending he had a duty to defend his legacy. Who's the one that spent 3 months live streaming every day, making millions of dollars, saying you're doing it in the name of Charlie's legacy? Like, get out of here. And also Ben only caring about Israel's interests. Okay, you know what? Ben is Jewish, so of course he's going to side on. And I don't agree with everything Ben's ever said about Israel, and he's probably gone over his skis a few times on stuff like that. And fair enough, there's room for criticism of that, but not from you. Not who cares about Israel too much. Who blames Israel for literally everything? Who has Israel derangement syndrome and is constantly talking about how Israel's responsible for absolutely everything on planet Earth? Like, no patience for that. Get out of here. I got to jump this second for a call, but maybe we can continue this conversation next week. Yeah, thanks, Tay, and we'll see you guys later.
See ya.